Now, one of the greatest things about SAM is its sort of gamified structure by design. It could be also the biggest curse. You can actually see your security posture as a number. But it is essential to stress very, very hard at this point, and I will be repeating this in many places in the course. The numerical score means nothing, and it should not be your goal to go for maximum score of 3.0 for everywhere and get an average score of 3.0. When you have a consistent approach and you start running consistent assessments, the comparative score between business unit A and B does mean something. Where things get even more useful is when we're trying to see the dials move. So if you run a baseline assessment and you get a score of 1.36, for instance. Okay, it's a number. You put together an implementation plan, an improvement plan for 6 months. You do the improvement and you go to 1.92. Now that's useful. That's where the value of an assessment score really comes in. Again, single number, hey, we got 2.03, it doesn't really mean much. The way the assessment itself is structured, there is one question that we ask for each of the 90 activities. So there are 90 questions. What we are saying is, are you doing this? And in deciding how to answer, you are looking at two things. Across what portion of the organization is the thing being done? So in many cases, the answers will say some of the applications, at least half of the applications, most or all of the applications. And in order to do that, you have to be clear what applications are in scope for the assessment. The second dimension or the quality criterion is the definition of done. What does it mean to be performing the practice? That guides you whether for each application the answer is yes or no. Now, as long as the activity being done meets the minimum threshold of quality or completeness, then we'll count that application. Then as you go through and say that, for instance, there are 10 applications in scope, you count how many applications this quality criterion is being met. Say 6, then you can say at least half of the applications as an answer. As I've mentioned earlier, security activities belong to a specific maturity level for the given stream. And SAM denotes 3 maturity levels, and here is what each maturity level would mean if you were to describe it qualitatively. Level 0 is where it all starts, you are not performing the activity, you are not doing anything. Level 1 means you are doing it at an ad hoc / best effort level. Level 1 is relatively easy to attain. At level 2, things are much more consistent and systematic. Think about a well-defined process with often automation and tooling behind it. Finally, level 3 is mastery. Your process is consistent and systematic, and you also invest in continuous improvements, typically driven by measurements. And obviously, level 3 is much, much harder to get to than, for instance, level 1. And the same is true for the relative score. Typically going from 0 to 1 is a lot easier than going from 2 till 3. Of course, there are exceptions. And important, not everyone needs to make to level 3, and definitely not in all areas. Honestly, that probably wouldn't be a good use of your limited resources. You would be probably throwing away money just to get to level 3. Now the great question is what the target maturity should be for the organization then. Well, that is largely up to you. You should define that in terms of your risk appetite, and your risk tolerance. Let's talk about the scoring. Now, the scoring has changed across the different versions of SAM. And from version 1.5, we modified the scoring model to provide multiple choice answers to allow for a more accurate assessment. So, for example, the question from education and guidance level 2 are those involved in development process given role-specific security training and guidance. The answer used to be yes or no. Now the answer is more fine-grained. And depending on your answer, which goes from no, some of them, at least half of them or most of them, you're going to get a score between 0 and 1, and you could also have 0, 25 or 0.5. Now, the thresholds, of course, are somewhat arbitrary. So it is up to you or the assessor to decide what some/a few or at least half actually mean. But make sure, and this is the most important there, to be consistent. So if you say some/few means 25%, and anything between 25% and 40% you get there, then you should use the same criterion everywhere. At least half, how much do you look at that? Is it 0.45%? Is that at least half, or has to be above 0.5? Most or all, where is your threshold again? Is it 0.8, 0.9? It's up to you as an assessor, or in other words, the model doesn't give you the exact numbers. And again, it is not necessary for every organization to achieve full marks across every practice. If governance is not a big deal, for instance, you are in a startup or a scale-up, it could score level 1 or 1.5, and that would be perfectly fine. Now, let's have a look at this example, testing for software security controls in control verification. And let us have a look at the sample question from the control verification stream in the requirements-driven security testing practice. The first maturity level question is whether or not you are testing the correct functioning of standard security controls. The quality criteria for this question are testing to verify the implementation of at least authentication, access control, input validation, encoding, escaping data, as well as encryption controls. At this level, things can be relatively ad hoc. So all of this can be done manually. The second quality criteria is that the ad hoc testing has to happen every time the application changes its use of controls. So whenever the input validation library changes, for instance, or when a new authentication protocol is added, you will have to retest the correct functioning of these security controls. So, assuming that both of quality criteria are fulfilled, if one of them is not fulfilled, you get a no. Assuming both are fulfilled, you simply count the percentage of the applications in scope for which both of these quality criteria are fulfilled. And note that it is perfectly fine to have one application in scope, and in that case, you would get, if both criteria are fulfilled, you would get full marks. If one of them or both of them are not in place, you would get a no. Now, all of this becomes useful when you are able to look at a scorecard that allows you to see how are we doing across the whole spectrum of practices. One of the nice things about a spider graph or spider chart, for instance, is that it lets you see where your strengths are and where you're very close to the center. And depending on your risk appetite and your risk profile, your risk exposure, you would perhaps like to improve those parts where you're closer to 0 or not. Again, it depends on your organization's realities. Some of the tools that are out there also allow you to visualize your security journey over time, and this is a nice way to demonstrate your improvements. I guess everyone at this point should be asking themselves, hey, but which tools can we use to do this? Well, at this point, there are 3 different approaches, 3 different alternatives. You can leverage the spreadsheets that are created by the core team and maintained by the core team. They are both in Microsoft Excel and Google Sheets versions available on our GitHub. You could also use Samwise. Samwise is an open source project that was donated to SAM, and you could run Samwise within your organization as a self-hosted solution. Finally, there is also SAMI. SAMI is a tool developed by Codific, one of our sponsors. And SAMI is a SaaS tool that goes actually way beyond enabling SAM assessments. It supports a security assurance process around SAM with roles and responsibilities, and it also comes with various integrations. It has a community edition that is completely free. All of these tools allow you to fill out an assessment and get a nice snapshot of your current SAM scores. Some of the tools like the spreadsheets and SAMI also will help you create an improvement roadmap and specify your target scores and perhaps even get a preview of how your score would go up, or in really weird cases go down, if you do certain practices and if you improve certain scores.